hello, welcome to Pixel Art 101. We're going to talk about basically general process for doing everything for people who maybe haven't learned the ins and outs of pixel art. And we're going to vibe out with some music in the background. So we're going to just use a tree as an example because I like trees and they're quite nice to draw. They're meditative and they tend to pop up a lot in games, so that works. And we'll maybe do some rocks as well. We're going to Bob Ross this. So first rule of thumb, use reference. If you don't use reference, you'll have no idea what you're drawing. And you'll end up drawing some weird thing from memory that makes no sense. So we'll grab a tree and we'll just kind of plonk it into our file and then scale it all the way down so that we don't have to worry too much about taking up all of our space. For this purpose, I think I'm going to do this in side view. Why not? Usually I do sort of three-quarters perspective because I do a lot of work on a game called Space Station 13, which is a sort of top-down RPG. I should actually have the stream chat open just so I can see if people are asking questions. We'll have an open forum for questions. So we have our ref, so we know what we're making. So we need a color palette for this. General rule of thumb for color palettes, don't use like really dark. So like don't. This is not the darkest tone that you should use unless you're doing a very specific style of pixel art. So we'll just say don't use black and white. Start off with a nice mid-tone of tree color. We'll sort of ignore the actual colors of this, and we'll just kind of try and make our own, give our own favorite color. Oh, audio just cut out. Okay, and it's back. Yeah, so we're going to start with our mid-tone, and when we're making a color palette, we you can feel like you should just do that and just make your colors sort of just go from light to dark, and that's also bad. You'll end up with a very sort of washed out sort of colorless image. So what we're going to do here instead is we're going to do a nifty little trick called hue shifting. So we'll take this mid-tone, and as we go darker, we go towards red for this, and we get more saturated. So you see here, it's already much more alive, it's much more vibrant. And when we're going in the other direction, we'll go towards yellow. And so you see automatically we've got a much stronger, it's much more alive than with the sort of just kind of this kind of gray almost. It sort of sucks the color out of everything. And then we'll just grab a green. We'll maybe go for a sort of quite nice neutral green, and then we'll do exactly the same thing, but this time when we're going lighter, we're going towards yellow, and when we're going darker, we're going towards blue. And you can see already it's much more vivid, much stronger shade. And so we'll end up using these two as our color palette. So now that we've sort of worked out the colors that we need, next up is the shape. So I like to start with just using the darkest shade as like a color block out kind of thing. So we'll select this whole box just so that we can sort of draw without worrying about the edges. And we'll just kind of draw the very basics, just go middle of the tree. So this kind of tree sort of flares out at the bottom, but not a whole lot. So we'll start off with just the main trunk, and then you'll see that it sort of has this kind of central. Need to actually make it a little bit smaller so that we can have more vertical room. So we have this central branch going all the way up, and then we have these little sort of side branches. Just have going off doing their own thing. We need to make sure that we actually think about the way that trees branch, which again comes down to ref. You can't really sort of necessarily learn that without actually looking at images. If anyone has any questions, feel free to use the chat. If if you have any questions whatsoever, if you're not quite sure about anything or some concept doesn't necessarily make sense, now's the time to sort of shout help, I don't know what I'm doing kind of thing in chat. So here we want some sort of more distant background stuff. So currently it's all just quite flat. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here and we're going to cheat by making our own extra tone. You always struggle to pick warmer colors when it comes to greens and blues. So I've actually done some sort of thinking about this, thinking about sort of how to decide sort of how to pick your colors. So this is quite a sort of warm palette. I've noticed that it always seems to go that blue is the dark's color and yellow is the light's color. So if we take this green instead as our midtone, then the darker you go, this is also like you can break the rules sort of when you understand them, but we can do a cooler tone like this. Actually, that's quite a nice color scheme as well, with sort of more like a cool version of this. And then in the other direction, we'll go up the yellows. Is that yeah. But that's pretty much my rule of thumb, is like the darks always go towards the blue and the lights always go towards the yellow. More often than not. There will be like exceptions to the rule, but go with what feels pretty. Yeah. So we're going to select the background here, and so this allows us to just draw behind this tree without using layers. SS13CA 2009 love, hell yeah. So we're going to use darks to push the perspective back. Yes, yeah, that is true. But yeah, so we're going to use the darkness of this sort of dark, deep brown red to sort of push the perspective backwards. Sort of the opposite of how environmental like distance. Basically, in when you're doing environment art, you want long distance to be lighter and close up to be darker. But in this case, we're doing it sort of the opposite, where we've got these dark things are being pushed away from us. just because of how your brain deals with sort of light and dark tones. And we'll just sort of fill this out. I always like to draw the branches first, because it kind of lets you think about what you're doing a little bit easier. I know that not everyone does, and some people just say like, I'll just draw the canopy and don't worry about like, you know, the branches. But I think it's healthy to draw the branches in and then add the canopy on top of them. So here we've already, as you can see, we've got this sort of nice forced sort of depth to the image. We'll do a little bit more. And always, it's always good and healthy to just sort of take a step back and look at what you're drawing, because if you sort of sit at this length, at this distance from the image, then you'll always miss out on some very crucial, like, overarching problems. So, like, I think here we maybe need some actual, like, big leaves, or sorry, big branches off in the background to kind of make this feel less flat. And in fact, we want some we want some of the sort of roots around the base to have this kind of fall off as well, because otherwise the base sort of feels a little bit anemic and it feels quite flat. And we'll sort of fill in these. That's why you're using select all inverse. Yeah. It's really good. I find it helps me a lot to just not worry too much about like layer management, because like having layers always slows me down and it stifles me creatively, I think. I know that not everyone feels the same way about it, and it's just a matter of like, this is how I work, and it's sort of, you got to find the way that you work best. So we've got a little bit of an issue here because the we were kind of drawing around the main branch, and that kind of ended up going into a little bit of like pillow shading stuff. So we're kind of trying to avoid that as best we can. And I'll go into pillow shading in a sec and what that is and how we avoid it. Okay, so we've got a pretty good situation here with the darks. So now we want to go into the lights, and we have a lot of lights that we can play with. So we want to be shading from a direction here. So we'll say that the light's coming from this direction. This is where the statement of what is pillow shading comes in. Pillow shading is, if I just copy this whole thing, pillow shading is a trap where you think, okay, well, we'll shade it like this because, you know, that's how it looks, and we'll just shade in the middle of everything, and that doesn't look great. So what we'll do instead is we'll shade from in this example, what's happening is we're shading with the idea that the light is coming from our eyes, which is absolutely not how it works in life, and it just looks awful and awkward. So if we were to shade a sphere like this, you just kind of end up with a nightmare. Whereas if we shade our sphere properly with a directional light, already, like, you know, that's a 5-second example, but already this is a much less awkward, and it looks much more like an actual object with form and volume. What are the benefits of using a Sprite over something like Photoshop? Very robust grid tools. It has built-in animation. So like, let me just start a new layer and then just demonstrate why I love a Sprite for its animation potential. Like, this is really, really good animation package. Like, it is so easy to just kind of it's really, really easy to just, you know, make animations that just work without having to faff around with like 8 million layers. And that's pretty much the pitch. But also it has like zillions of other things. Like you've got this. I always like to put my palettes in here into the actual file itself, but you have this really, really useful palette editor here, that we can say like we can load a palette, and it has like all of these preset palettes for whatever platform you want to develop for. So if you want to do Commodore 64 style, you can just load that up. It's even got the 4-color Game Boy screen. You got 4 seasons of this anime. So anyway, we'll go back to our tree, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna just shade with the idea that light is coming from this direction. And so again, we're using this same technique of just select and mask, so we don't have to finick around with, like, you know, whether we're painting on here or what. So here we go. We've got our. We're going to push some of these branches into the foreground just by coloring them all entirely, like this. Do this sparingly, otherwise you'll end up with just everything being washed out and really too light. So here we go. Also, if you were like, the other reason that I like doing the branches first, then the canopy, is that it makes it much easier if you want to have, if you decide later that you want to have dead branches, like a dead version of the tree, if you want to do, like, you know, a spooky, scary place in your levels. So it's nice to have that option. So we gotta always consider stuff with volume. Never think, okay, this is a flat image. It's always a 3-dimensional shape. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some extra shading in here to sort of push our roots in. There we go. And we'll sort of shove this into the foreground a little bit. We'll add some light there. And we'll kind of break up this long line, because this is kind of making a weird, awkward, kind of looks like the whole tree is just this sort of tube. Is there much difference if you buy a Sprite from Steam or straight from the official site? I don't think that there is. Steam has the odd bit of weirdness just with like, accidental activation of the Steam interface, whatever it's called, the overlay, which is annoying, but you can turn that off. So we're going to add some of the dark tones back in to this edge. And just a little bit on this side. So we're kind of essentially we're just painting with light here, is the way I'd like to describe it. So now what we do is we'll go into our next shade, and we'll just kind of continue building up the layers of light. And again, always looking super here for more Bob Ross casual pixel streams. Well, so I stream over at. Am I allowed to self-plug? Is that acceptable? Am I allowed to like shamelessly self-promote on this event? Because I do stream this actually on Twitch quite regularly. Please do self-promote. Oh, okay, well, yeah, so I'm at, I'll just type it in here. Please feel free to go follow me over there. I do mostly just random art streams. Yeah, so I do a lot of sort of random mixed art streams. I do VFX as that's sort of my principal job. And therefore sort of what I know quite a lot. But I also do pixel art and pretty much whatever I decide to do. Sometimes I do the occasional bit of like development on my little game. It's a little sort of Metroidvania game about a witch, and I think that it's quite neat. So you may notice here, we're not actually adding any of the really, really light colors, and that's because this area is in shade. So we're actually going to sort of keep this dark, so it doesn't sort of. Oh, thank you for the follow. Yeah, so we keep this area dark so that it doesn't feel like this whole thing is sort of uniformly shaded. But we'll add like the occasional sort of bit in here. Also, it may be quite obvious from the way my mouse is moving that I'm actually using a graphics tablet. I know a lot of pixel artists don't like to use graphics tablets. I'm one of the weird ones. I absolutely love to use a graphics tablet almost all the time for pixel art because I think it makes it easier to just paint. And do you have a general rule about how many shades you use? Yes and no. If it's more than 6, you have a problem. If it's less than 4, you have a problem. But again, it depends on your style, because this is sort of quite common style for me. So I think I'm gonna have like my biases, as we all do. So I'm gonna grab this, copy it down here, and we're gonna start putting in some greenery. So I'm actually feeling this color a little bit more. So we'll just sort of plonk this down here. Yes, pixel art with the tablet is best. It's very, very nice and relaxing. So we're just going to put in a little bit of stuff here, just like that. Also going to save this, and we're going to call this Finnish game jam underscore tree. There we go. Right, okay, so now we're going to start with exactly the same process. We're going to just blob in. Actually, we'll do this on a new layer. So just kind of put in our front, our like main volume, big front bit. And then we'll plonk in some darker background colors. Do a little bit of layers here. Ooh, there we go. We'll just kind of like give ourselves some breathing room. We're just kind of doing the same thing again. But in a sec, we're going to run into one of my other favorite features about Sprite. And again, we're considering this all as a volume, so this is going to be the sort of main. Like we'll consider this as kind of like the same as the sphere. It's just a sphere of leaves, really. A wonky sphere. We don't want to worry too much about what is the shortcut to select everything. W. I think that's the normal one. I'm not sure. I think I use mostly standard shortcuts, but I have a couple of custom shortcuts just because I work in a little bit of a weird way sometimes. And because we're in a game jam, I'm gonna show you some cheaty little tricks for making art quickly rather than making it, you know, perfect and beautiful. So if you were doing, you know, real proper, like make it look pretty pixel art, you know, you'd do all of these sort of little like leafy shape things. But if you don't have time for that, what you can do is you can just go to the Sprite, what is it called? It's called the Jumble Tool, and it's one of my favorite tools because it's really easy to just make things fast because you just jumble the edges. This is not going to make everything pretty, but it will make it quickly. And you can just sort of curate it a little bit just with like, you know, the occasional good, like strong shape in here, like this. Jumble Tool is cool. Hello, welcome. So I like the Jumble Tool. It's not going to give you a tree, but it's going to give you a vague interpretation of a tree that you can then mess with yourself. Because pixel art takes time, and sometimes when you're in a game jam, you just kind of want to get something to a state where you can see it and not worry too much. Because it's better to have a bad game than no game, in my opinion. So yeah, it's a cool little effect. You can do it on the edges just to give yourself like a little bit of variation, so that you don't have this weird sort of like plasticine effect. What's my game? It is a Metroidvania game about a little witch. If we have time at the end of the demo, maybe I'll show it off a little. But the main priority here is to get everything looking good and to explain how we get to that whole point of looking good. So I reckon now we can move on to our next shade and just kind of keep building up like we did with the bark and the trunk of the tree. But we'll focus this one onto the areas that we want to be sort of central and sort of near us. So we kind of push this stuff towards the viewer. And so as long as we look at it from far away at all times, we can easily tell what needs to change. So this is sort of feeling a little bit flat, so we'll kind of give it some depth. We'll just sort of push bits back and push bits forward as we need, so that we can establish what is or isn't nearby. We can put a little bit of the darks in here just to sort of make you feel more leafy. So I think that given that we have these two different shades, we could probably go for actually a sort of darker one, kind of like how we added an extra shade here. We'll just do the same for this. So we'll go very, very dark and very blue, like that. Like it is actually a blue. It is not even green at this point, but in context, because colors always exist in context with the colors around them. We can just start putting in this this blue to the background, and it will give us colors that are far away from us. And it will give us a little bit of extra depth. And then we can use it also to just kind of add some really, really dark tones in to really, really push the shape of the tree, like leaf canopy. Yeah, insta depth. To really, really shove it into the background. Because we don't really see colors, we see the communication between colors, and that's important to bear in mind at all times, is that when you're looking at colors, it's always really just actually an optical illusion of how the colors interact with each other. So the same blue can look gray if you put it into a very vibrant environment around it, or if you put it with a gray, then it'll look very vibrant. So it's all about colors talking to each other. We're going to have some more of these darks on this side, because this is the sort of shaded side, the shadowy side, and that's away from the light. And we'll kind of break up all of these weird, awkward sort of like meta shapes, is how I sort of describe them, where like you get shapes that your brain can see that aren't sort of strictly there, because we have this really good pattern recognition. So we have this sort of square here. We don't really want that, because it can look a bit awkward when your brain sees things line up. It breaks the illusion in a bad way. So like we just let our eyes sort of unfocus a bit and sort of search. Over here, there's a bit of an awkwardness. But also over here, we have an effect. We don't see colors. Yeah, exactly. We don't see colors. Here we have an example of what's called banding. Banding is an annoying problem. So basically, we'll say that we've got this box here, like that. We'll just turn it into a branch, and we'll shade it. And I'll shade it wrong first so that we can see, and then I will shade it correctly. So this is shaded badly, and then I will do it correctly, and then we'll sort of look at them and decide, well, like explain why it works the way it does. So, okay, here we go. So this is banded because what happens is that our brain sees this shape, this line here, and it matches up perfectly with these two. And what that does is basically we see these weird meta shapes, these lines of these sort of lines that don't strictly exist, but we kind of see them because our brains like to see the patterns in things. So what we have to do is we kind of break them up. We shuffle these things up and down a little bit, and we kind of break these repeating shapes. So if you look at it from zoomed away, this looks much more awkward than this. And so that's the same kind of thing that we're going to be doing here with basically making sure that we don't have any of these weird sort of meta shape structure things. So over here, we're getting a little bit of it. We kind of have this weird sort of gradient kind of effect. And we'll just sort of deal with that just by kind of breaking up that a little bit. And actually, we just made it worse. So you see how like it can be very, very tricky to deal with. So there, we sort of like dealt with it a little bit. But again, it's a really, really tricky thing to sort of avoid as an artist. Over here, we'll just sort of put in some depth in here. And what we can also do is we can just use the Jumble Tool to sort of break up these weird sort of gradient bands. That's one very nice thing about the Jumble Tool, actually. So here we have this sort of, we have an issue with these two colors are clashing quite badly. So what we're going to do to avoid this problem is going to kind of give this a little bit of like an outline. And what that'll basically do is prevent these very bright colors from hurting each other, essentially, from arguing. So you see here we've kind of given our brain a little bit of a shape to split these colors apart so that they don't argue in our head. And same here. We're just kind of giving it some breathing room. See, we thought that this was Pixel Art 101, but this was actually Art 101, and you've all been bamboozled. Because pixel art's just art, but with less color availability. So again, we've got these sort of big flat areas that we kind of want to break up a little. So we'll give ourselves some little sort of twinkly bits, just where the light happens to hit. Happens to hit the leaves, just sort of the random leaves that can happen to pop out. So just sort of like a little pop pop. I was going to ask if it's possible to get a copy of this for a friend that would really benefit from everything you covered at once. Yes, absolutely. I don't know if this is being like recorded, but absolutely 100% yes. Being recorded and stored. Fantastic. I hope this also helps with the jam as well. Oh, here's another one. This weird shape. It kind of feels like this box of pixels is just kind of sitting on the edge, and it kind of turns this into a box, and then it just all. We don't want that. We break it. All these funky little pseudo shapes. So again, here we've got this box, and if we just run a line through it, it kind of breaks it up and makes it so our brain can't see that shape or that meta shape. So it's basically just about using an optical illusion to kill another optical illusion. This jam flourishes from the wisdom you've bestowed upon us. I'm very grateful that that you can take something from this. We're going to just sort of run some more dark tones in here. So at this point, actually, we can start deciding whether or not, like here, this is quite an aggressive leap of color, so it might be worthwhile going a little bit hello? Hello? Oh, we're back. I think the call cut out for a sec. Yeah, we're back. Yeah, so here we can start talking about a fun little... Okay, so it seems that whenever I hit Control E, which is my merge down command, it ends the Skype call. That's unhelpful. Okay, we'll just hit that. There we go. Cool. Okay, now we no longer have to worry about this. Right, yeah, so there's quite an aggressive leap between these two because, as you see, they're both very highly saturated colors. And if we take these two colors without changing anything about them other than their saturation, we can see something very, very useful and insightful, which is that grays communicate easier than highly saturated colors. So the closer you get to gray, the less the colors argue. So what we can do is we can take this and we can just use color replace to take this dark, very, very strong red, and we'll just kind of give it a little bit less aggression and make it a little bit darker. So there, already we've kind of helped a little bit, just to really sort of kill some of the argument between these colors. And then we'll get some shading in. So already the colors are playing a little bit nicer. This is a little bit weird. I think this maybe we need to sort of cover over a little bit more. There we go. Just a little bit of right, just to bring it back into the picture a bit. Have a little hole in it. So the other thing that I want to talk about is outlines, because outlines are good and healthy. I personally think that outlines are really, really good for just kind of keeping everything from blending into a horrible mess of colors. And it makes it easier to sort of see the shapes. So here we're going to run an outline around this whole area. Everywhere that it needs one. And we'll see how that looks, because sometimes it can be a little bit finicky getting the outlines looking nice. But yeah, there we've sort of really, really kind of brought out the the shape a lot. It kind of doesn't sort of just flow into nothing. Here we got another weird meta shape here, so we're just gonna break that with a little bit of a curve. And then we'll get some outlines down here. Not everything necessarily needs outlining. It's just basically to get like a bit of a stronger silhouette on everything. As you can see, it's sort of really bringing everything out a bit. Kind of like a subtle drop shadow. Yeah. Visual chunking is a good way of putting it. And then we're gonna just steal another color. I'm gonna run an outline on this. Very, very subtle. Yeah, see, so here we've actually given ourselves a meta shape again, which we don't want. Yeah, so everything's sort of looking much stronger, I guess. And now I'd say that this is sort of absolutely good enough to put in a game. You know, like, there's always more stuff that you can do. I think you can work on a piece of art for as long as you want, and it'll still have room for improvement. It's just a question of sort of deciding where to call it, I think. Because we've already overrun, actually. So I'd say that this is sort of, you know, you could call this done. Some issues, but it's a game jam. Nothing has to be perfect. Does anyone have any sort of parting questions for, like, this little live demo tutorial thing? Perfect is the enemy of done, absolutely. You never want perfect, you always want done. Or you always want good enough. There's always the fuck it adjustment of just saying, you know what, this'll do. So I'm gonna stop sharing screen there. Oh yeah, I hope that that was illuminating in some way. And I'll pass it back to your lovely hosts. This was great. Can't even think of any questions at the moment. Well, that's all good. I mean, I'll be around. I'm on the Discord, so just at me. And also feel free to hang out on my streams where I will always be down for... I do tutorials, and I also do like art feedback, so you're welcome to just kind of hop on my streams and just poke me and ask for art feedback, and you can just send in your stuff, and I will look through it, and I will draw red lines on it and explain how it can be improved. Neat. Not sure where the hosts are.
Who are you calling lovely people there? I mean hosts. Anyway, thank you, Erin. We actually really did follow as organizers here, and that was really lovely. And I hope a lot of people do go to your channel and check out what you do. Anyway, that is has been Erin Somervail with Pixel Art 101.